For a long, long time now, there hasn't been a country on Earth quite like the United States. I mean, it's a giant on the world stage, militarily, culturally, you name it. Its alliances cover the map, and its defense budget, well, it's bigger than the entire economy of many nations. It's basically been the world's default superpower.
But here's the big question we're tackling today. What if America just decided to step back from all that? What if it pulled its troops home, walked away from its alliances, and just turned inward to focus on its own stuff? Okay, let's really dive into this massive what if.
Okay, first things first, we need to get a crucial distinction straight. We're not talking about total isolationism, cutting off all contact with the rest of the world. What we're really exploring here is a huge shift toward non-interventionism. That means you'd still trade, you'd still have diplomats, but you'd stay out of foreign wars and military pacts. It sounds similar, but that difference is huge.
So, if the US actually did this retreat, the very first ripple effect would be felt right in the wallet. It all starts with the money.
And to get a sense of the scale here, just wrap your head around this number. In 2015, the US spent $601 billion on its military. That is more than the next 7 biggest spenders. We're talking China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the UK, India, France, and Japan combined. Adopting a non-interventionist policy would suddenly free up a crazy amount of cash.
So what do you do with all that money? Well, on one side of the coin, you have these enormous potential gains right at home. You could pour that money into education, science, policing, maybe start chipping away at the national debt. The argument is pretty simple, right? Fix your own problems first. But on the other side, a retreat like this often goes hand in hand with things like tariffs. And that's where you get potential losses, because you start closing off business opportunities and making it harder to access global markets.
And this gets at a really hidden cost. It's this tension between saving money now versus losing opportunities later. As Kari Hierman from the Brookings Institution puts it, even if you don't have an immediate economic crash, the long-term damage is very real. It just slowly constricts the economy, cutting down on competition and opportunity. So saving all that cash on defense, it might come with a pretty hefty economic price tag down the road.
Now let's follow this out to the second ripple, because a US pullback is about way more than just money. It's about security. For decades, American allies have basically lived under a US military shield. What in the world happens when that shield just goes away?
Well, the strongest argument for bringing all the troops home can pretty much be summed up in one word: Iraq. That war cost over $2 trillion, and more importantly, the lives of nearly 4,500 Americans. People who argue for non-interventionism say, look, if we pull back, we stop getting into these devastating, costly foreign wars.
But of course, the reality is so much more complicated. Just look at these two potential flashpoints. In the South China Sea, a U.S. withdrawal might actually prevent a catastrophic war by removing a direct military challenge to China. But then you look at the Baltics. A U.S. withdrawal from NATO could do the exact opposite. It might embolden Russia to invade, sparking a massive war in Europe. It's an incredibly dangerous global balancing act.
And this brings us to what is honestly the most terrifying possibility of all. Without that U.S. security guarantee, allies might start thinking they need the ultimate weapon to protect themselves. As the Chicago Council on Global Affairs put it, the unthinkable, allies building their own nuclear bombs, is becoming thinkable again.
You can see how this could spiral completely out of control. It's like a domino effect. Step 1, the US packs up its nuclear umbrella. Step 2, countries like South Korea and Japan, who are right next door to China and North Korea, suddenly feel incredibly vulnerable. So what's the logical next step for them? Maybe it's building their own nukes, which could kick off a terrifying new arms race.
And don't for a second think this is just some hypothetical exercise. You can already see this shift happening in new U.S. defense strategy. The focus is moving to something called Fortress America, making the homeland priority number 1. Deterring China is the main foreign goal, and Europe, well, it's now officially a secondary priority.
The message to allies is becoming crystal clear. When it comes to conventional defense, you're on your own. This idea of burden sharing, where allies pay more for security, isn't just a friendly suggestion anymore. According to this new line of thinking, it's a requirement. Europe has to handle Europe. So, if the U.S. pulls back its money and its military, what's the final massive ripple? It's a fundamental change in who runs the world. A total shift in the global power balance. This power vacuum would basically present the world with a really stark choice. For decades, the globe has more or less operated on a US-led model, one that values things like democracy and human rights.
But in a world where America retreats, the new dominant power would almost certainly be China, pushing a very different model, one based on authoritarianism and economic power. The language of global business could even shift from English to Mandarin.
This is all about something called soft power. It's the influence a country gets from its culture, its movies, its businesses, its ideals like liberty. If America goes home, that influence doesn't just vanish into thin air. It gets replaced. And the world our kids and grandkids grow up in could look and feel very, very different.
Now, to be fair, this whole shift isn't happening in a vacuum. The old idea that global openness is always the best path forward, well, it's been challenged, and for some pretty good reasons. That system created winners and losers, and a lot of people feel the US ended up paying too much of the price for not enough of the reward.
And this brings us to what might be the most fascinating part of this whole story. This debate, whether America should be deeply involved in the world or should pull back, it's nothing new. In fact, you could say it's as old as the nation itself.
I mean, let's go all the way back to 1796. In his farewell address, George Washington himself warned the new country against entangling alliances and said it should have as little political connection as possible with other nations. This idea of non-interventionism is basically baked into America's DNA from the very beginning.
And you can see this historical pendulum just swing back and forth over time. That non-interventionist view was dominant for a long time, hitting its peak in the 1930s just before World War II. Then, boom, the Cold War flipped the script completely, kicking off the era of American global leadership we've been in ever since. And now, here in the 2020s, you can feel that pendulum swinging back again.
And this is not just some fringe political theory. This idea has real, widespread popular support. A Pew Research poll found that 52% of Americans, a clear majority, agreed with the statement that the U.S. should mind its own business internationally. That's the highest that number has been in half a century.
So at the end of the day, we're left with this massive, fundamental question. Is pulling back from the world a responsible act of self-preservation? A smart way to fix problems at home and stay out of endless wars? Or is it a reckless gamble that could unleash global chaos, a new nuclear arms race, and a much darker, more repressive world order? The debate is back, and the stakes could not be higher.